An entitled Karen tries to force her kid to cross 5 lanes of traffic as a form of practice from coming home from school. But once I saw that, I decided to intervene, getting this Karen in more trouble than she ever anticipated. Here's what happened. Okay, for a bit of context, I currently live in a suburb in Texas. My son's primary school is on a large stretch of road and it is 5 lanes, and the speed limit is 70 miles an hour, but during school zone hours, it's 30 miles an hour. The school sits right in the middle, and the crosswalks are at least half a mile each way, maybe more. The point is, it's not close. One's closer than the other, but it's not a brisk walk. It is definitely a trek. This road is also very popular and houses all tiers of public education. There are giant trucks, working trucks, and all manner of cars at any given hour, and it is super backed up during school hours. And so here we are. My husband is pulling out of the school, and it is a chore because of the heavy traffic. He then notices a kid right next to us on the sidewalk, showing signs of looking down these 5 lanes. My husband then says, "Oh, he better not be trying to cross the street. What is going on?" And he hardly mentions that before slamming the pedal. The kid had stepped into the road, and my husband pulled immediately into the street to stop people on that lane. The kid then pulls back. I then jump out of the car and I yell at the kid to immediately discourage anything. And let me tell you something, this kid was not fine. I couldn't even get a word out of him, and he couldn't explain to me what he was doing. He was panicking, blubbering, and looking to the other side, and I had to hold him just so he would stop crying. He kept looking towards a cyclist on the other side of the road. She was yelling at me, and you could not hear over the 5 lanes even if you wanted to. But I figured it was his mom, so I asked her, "Do you want me to drive him to you?" Well, she did not like that. This crazy Karen barged down those 5 lanes, thus further worsening public opinion over cyclists. She was in her entire gear, and yet she left her bike on the other side. She just tossed it down. She then stormed onto the road holding out her hand. The cars rolled to a stop, with the last one being a gigantic Texas truck whose hood was at her shoulder. This entitled Karen then looks at me and says, "What is the problem here?" And she actually had the audacity to ask me that. I then look at her and I say, "Are you his mother?" And I lay down the narrative to judge her character above her preferred mode of transportation. This entitled Karen then says, "Yes, I am." And at this point, she started rambling, and I honestly could not believe what I was hearing, so I just cut her off. I said to her, "Okay, but he was trying to cross the street." And it was at this moment that this lady said something that truly blew my mind. She looked at me and said, "I know, we are practicing." And let me tell you something, I can't tell you the way my heart sank to hear that this woman planned to put her 8-year-old son into this situation and fully intended for him to do so on his own, as if it takes exposure therapy to get over one's fear of getting hit by a car. Now, it's important to note that I am not a busybody. I disengage with people whose tone screams entitlement, and this really is a skill that you master in Texas. But I am, however, shamelessly confrontational, especially when it involves a child who can't defend themselves. I then turned towards my husband, who had now parked back inside the school lot, and I yelled to him, "Oh, it's okay. They're just practicing endangering the life of a child." But he just screamed back by saying, "What?" Because, you know, the 5 lanes of traffic, no one can hear anything. But I just pretended that he could hear me. I said to him, "I know, who does that? Not me, you know, a normal person," because I was just being an absolute jerk right back to that lady. She had taken her son to the side, knelt and held his hands, and was rambling to him her crazy nonsense about me. Once those people go off, you can control the energy they spend on you and keep them engaged in some kind of way. I wanted her to stay there because I wasn't going to let it go, but I really needed the good guys though, those who were forced by the fires of crazy. So I stormed right into the school building and knocked on the office window, where 3 lovely women of varying levels of administrative power were already there, and I opened up dramatically again. I said to them, "This is urgent. A kid tried to cross the street on his own. He almost got hit by a car. I stopped him and his mother told me that they were practicing." Well, those women were in disbelief, as those with functioning amygdalas would typically be. They tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but once I pointed out that she was in her cyclist gear and her bike was 5 lanes away, they started to call in the cavalry. The lady most intent on stopping her took the walkie-talkie from the other lady and stormed out. The now walkie-talkie-less lady asked me for a bit more about what happened, and I reiterated my brief experience, emphasizing the road being crossed right there where the bike lay, and she finally believed that it happened. They mostly talked to themselves about their rules for children on that road, and it was nice to hear they already had them down to specifics, as one would assume. I mean, it was the whole reason I went to go be a dirty snitch. I only knew that jaywalking was illegal in all of Texas, and I break it all the time myself on the road, but it's a special kind of demented to make a young child do it on his own, especially in Texas, where one more lane is our only understanding of infrastructure, right next to sky roads, and your tax money builds my buddy's privatized tolls. From here on, it wasn't my problem anymore. I only lingered slowly like the smug jerk that I am, just to make sure the walkie-talkie lady managed to engage the mother. When we drove past them, the mother glared daggers at me while yelling at the walkie-talkie lady. So I waved at her with a warm smile. And bless her heart, she actually thinks that she's right. Deep down though, I'm still panicked that it even happened. I know the school will handle it. They have a really good security system involving rules and volunteers because sadly, that's what we've needed to resort to since other previous incidents in the state. They will make that lady know that she's no exception to these keep the child alive rules as long as she's on their property, because anywhere else she can pretty much do whatever she wants. And honestly, that last part is what keeps me up at night. That poor kid was a mess when I talked to him. He couldn't communicate with me and he was terrified of his mother, but the least I can do is keep an eye out for him each day after school, just to make sure that this entitled Karen doesn't try that stunt ever again. That is a crazy situation. I honestly cannot believe someone would make their son do that. We're talking 5 lanes of traffic in Texas of all places. And while I've never lived in Texas, I have driven there, and let me tell you something, some people down there cannot drive in the slightest. I'm not trying to make generalizations, but seriously, it was really bad when I went there to visit friends. So when this original poster talks about their roads really being awful, I definitely believe them. But you know what? Good for the original poster and their husband for actually having some kind of sense about them to stop and make sure that this kid was alright, because that entitled Karen absolutely put their kid in danger. And I'm sure that if you didn't intervene, something bad definitely could have happened. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My entitled managers give me some tasks that are literally impossible to do all in the same day. And despite calling for help several times, these people left me with quite literally no help. So I decided to maliciously comply by showing everybody just how impossible my task was. Here's what happened. So I used to work as a driver for a freight company, and we used to handle awkward sized items that no other couriers would touch. We would deliver everything from coffins to tractor parts. We also had to collect things from our customers for delivery the next day. This company had a mixture of contractors and permanent drivers, and I was a relief driver. I knew most of the routes, so I covered holidays or sickness. The management of the depot consisted of a delivery manager and a collection manager. These two people didn't quite see eye to eye, as sometimes getting the stuff delivered conflicted with getting stuff collected, and their targets reflected failures in a bad way. This particular day, I had to cover a contractor's route, and I didn't know the route, so as we had to load our trucks, this took a little longer than usual. I had around 45 deliveries that day, which is predominantly high for this area. I asked my manager, who is the delivery manager, if he knew the route at all, and he replied that he did and ordered my route for me, so I was good to go, albeit a bit late. I did say that with the volume I had, I may struggle, and I asked him to keep an eye out for me, and he said okay. Well, I got to near midday, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to complete all the deliveries, and the collections wouldn't get done either. I also noted that one of the collections was off route, and the contractor had a vehicle in that area anyways. I then called in and I spoke to my manager for the delivery side of things, and told him he had a choice of collections or deliveries. I also asked why the contractor couldn't cover the off-route collection, and I was told to call back later, and he'll see if something can be sorted out. He also said that the off-route collection would have to be done as well. I then called back later and I asked for help again, but he said there was no help available, so I gave him the option of deliveries or collections as there wasn't time to do both, but he categorically said that both had to be done. The delivery manager went home, so I called in again and I got the collection manager, and she just reiterated that there was no help at all, so either I failed the deliveries or failed the collections, and if that happened, I would have been hauled into the office the next day, so I decided to maliciously comply. I called into one of the collections and I asked what time they closed, and they told me 6:30 p.m. So I said I'd be back later, and I carried on with the deliveries, which only took me further away from that collection. At the appropriate time, I stopped delivering and I drove straight to collections, and I collected 2 small parcels, and that was it. I then drove back to where I had stopped and carried on delivering, and this cost me maybe about an hour. I finished my last delivery at 7:15 p.m. and I had a 45-minute drive back to my yard. As I was leaving the round, I got a frantic call from the collection manager. She was wondering where I was at, but I told her what happened, and I told her that I'd asked for help 4 times, and I was told I had to do everything allocated to me. So I did, and it wasn't my fault that it happened like this. Well, here's where the real trouble started. The company's trunking company is a fluid one, and it depends on trucks leaving the depot at a certain time. For our depot, the cutoff time was 7:30 p.m., and I wheeled in at just about 8 o'clock p.m. So there were 15 pissed off guys on overtime, all waiting for me to turn up, and an articulated truck waiting for these 2 parcels. This This wait caused the whole trunking company to be late the next day. My routing was discussed when I got back as it was questionable at best, and when I told the collections manager that it was the delivery manager that organized it, there was a massive blow up. There were angry emails between the delivery and collection managers, and I would imagine that the logistics team would have demanded an explanation too. So basically, many butts were kicked. The next day, no one said a word. I wasn't on that route, and going forward, at least for a little bit, they either helped out when I asked, or they just didn't get me to do as much at all. Also, as I had exceeded legal driving time, they had to make sure that I went home early for a few days, so that was a bit of a win there. The biggest trouble these guys had was that they always assumed that the drivers were after an easy day, and even when presented with the evidence, they assumed that you were still trying to fly by. But thankfully, this time bit them in the butt incredibly badly. Wow, I can't stand managers who act like this, who seriously try to be like, oh yeah, you're just trying to get out of working. But it's like, no genius, I literally can't finish the job you gave me. You gave me an impossible task and this is not my problem. So I just love the fact that the original poster maliciously complied and basically said, oh okay, you're gonna give me something impossible to do? Congratulations, I'm coming back to work late. And the fact that this put everybody behind is just so funny to me, because this literally is the consequences of your manager's decisions. Because if they were just a little bit more reasonable, all of this quite literally could have been avoided. An entitled bully ruins my birthday party by forcing me and my friends to follow his every command. But once things started catching on fire and really getting out of hand, my birthday party very quickly was canceled. Here's what happened. Okay, to set the scene, it was my 8th birthday, and it was my first birthday in our new house. It was the early 70s, and my parents were first-time homeowners, and they wanted my first birthday in the new house to be one that I always would remember. So they decided to throw a birthday party for me, inviting my cousins and all the neighborhood kids as well. A few of my aunts, one of my grandmothers, and a few neighborhood moms were there too. All the kids were down in the basement with no grown-ups to supervise, and one of the kids had an older brother who was there as well. He was put in charge by the grown-ups, and we were sternly told by the grown-ups that the older brother, who we will call Jeff, was the person in charge, and we were to follow Jeff's orders when there were no adults downstairs with us. Jeff was much bigger than the rest of us, and as soon as the grown-ups were out of the room, he would start bullying the younger kids, making us do all sorts of mischief, or else he would punch us. He would tell us to do something, and if we said no, he would make this great fist in front of your face. And to us younger kids, it looked like the fist from the Incredible Hulk. He had us saying swear words whenever an adult would come down the stairs, and he wrote swear words on the cement walls with chalk and made other kids take the blame. We were all given paper cups, and he made all of us hold out our paper cups, and then used a dart to poke several holes in the bottom of each kid's cup. My mother and aunt came downstairs and said, okay kids, who want some Kool-Aid? And not sensing the normal enthusiasm that a bunch of 6 to 8-year-olds would normally have for Kool-Aid, my mother thought that something was wrong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. She looked at our blank faces for a moment and said, oh, for God's sakes, hold out your cups, it's red Kool-Aid for crying out loud. This is everybody's favorite. Well, hesitantly, we held out our cups. My mother comes over to the first kid, raises the clear glass pitcher of red Kool-Aid, and starts to pour. Well, the Kool-Aid went straight in the cup, then out the bottom through the dart-punched holes, like a lawn sprinkler with red dye in the water. There was red Kool-Aid everywhere, on the table cover, all over the floor, on the kid, and on my mother. The older kid then howled with laughter as my mother scolded the poor helpless kid standing there with Kool-Aid stained pants and a formerly white t-shirt that most definitely would never be any shade of white ever again. My mother then said, Lord Almighty above, why would you do such a thing? She then moved on to the next kid, and wouldn't you guess it, the same thing happens. She then checked everyone else's cup, and everyone except for the big kid had holes in their cup. He slowly sipped and savored his Kool-Aid in front of the rest of our jealous eyes, like it was sweet nectar being sipped from a holy chalice. My mother and aunt stormed back upstairs and came down a few minutes later with hot dogs, their footsteps sounding like peeling Velcro, as they stepped into the many sticky, dried red Kool-Aid puddles lying around the floor like a sinister minefield. Then they went back upstairs only to come rushing back down a few moments later after they overheard a chaos that had erupted downstairs. When they got downstairs to see what the commotion was about, it looked as if there was an explosion in a condiment factory, as the walls, floor, and ceiling had become a canvas for a condiment mosaic. And that's when the food fight had broken out, which is something that Jeff had ordered us to do. My mother and aunt issued the riot act and gave us our final warning, as the older kid they put in charge stood innocently in the corner with an evil smirk on his face. Well, back upstairs they went, and they came downstairs a few minutes later with a birthday cake and placed it on the table with very stern looks on their faces. They were not going to put up with the slightest hint of foolishness. They were absolutely done. Well, we took the visual hint and put on our best behavior as we made our way in an orderly fashion to the wretched-looking table that had Kool-Aid stains and condiment smears so that we could try and get a piece of cake. We sat there and ate our cake and behaved very well while we were doing so. My mother and aunt then went back upstairs and left us alone again, but this time someone lit the table on fire. Well, my mother and aunt came roaring down the stairs again, telling everyone to get out and go home, as they became volunteer firefighters in that moment. And as you can probably guess, that was the last ever birthday party for me that my parents held at my house. Wow, what a crazy circumstance. Like seriously, Jeff is one of those bad kids that should not have been in charge. And I feel really bad for you and your friends, because I'm sure that none of you wanted this. You definitely just wanted to have like a normal birthday party and spend time with your friends, but here comes Jeff literally lighting the house on fire. Like, that kid is seriously insane. That is not okay. You can't just light the table on fire in the middle of a birthday party. Not to mention the Kool-Aid incident and them having a food fight. Like, for me, if I was the mom or the aunt in this situation, the food fight and the Kool-Aid incident would have been like my last straw. There's no way I would put up with that, like not for a second. So hopefully you didn't have any more interactions with Jeff growing up, because that guy sounds like a nightmare, and I'm willing to bet that the older Jeff got, the worse he probably was. Am I the jerk for pressing charges against my sister after she stole over $1,500 from my bank account? Because right now my parents are furious with me, saying that they could have paid it back if I just gave them time. Here's what happened. I'm a 24-year-old female, and my 26-year-old sister called me and asked if she could stay with me for the week, as she said that she missed me and we were both free. And when she asked this, I did say yes because I missed her as well. We're both college students, and she's in her final year, and I'm in my second year, and we live in different states. My sister came down and slept on my couch, as I have a one-bedroom apartment. Monday and Tuesday was great. We went out together, did some shopping, and had some sisterly time. Wednesday came along and I had to go to work, and so I asked her if she's alright staying in the apartment by herself, and she said yes. While on my lunch break, I was searching for my credit card. My backpack has a specific section that's hidden away where I put my valuables in, such as my cell phone, my wallet, or my keys. I searched and my wallet wasn't there. I texted my sister and I asked if she had seen my wallet, and she replied no and said that she'd look for it. I do have Apple Pay, so I still can purchase some lunch. I got home and she said she found it on top of my sock drawer, and I was suspicious as I went in there yesterday morning and I knew it wasn't there. When I got home, I logged into my online banking and I saw that over $1,500 had been withdrawn across 2 accounts. I had strong suspicions that it was my sister, and I told her that I'm calling the police as someone's withdrawn money from my accounts. Well, it didn't take long for her to confess that she took my wallet and used my money. Now, it's important to know that my sister is a golden child who never is in trouble. I was sick and tired of her getting away with everything, and not only that, but it's money that I can't afford to lose. I told her that I'm calling the police and that I want to press charges, but my sister kept crying and screaming and begging to not call the police, as she said she would have my money in 24 hours time. Now, as I was speaking to the dispatcher on the phone, my sister was trying to grab the phone from my hand. After she failed to do so, she ran to my room, called our parents, and whilst I was on the phone to 911, my parents were constantly trying to call me. As soon as I hanged up, within 1 second, they called me back, and the dispatcher said they were sending police officers to my address. As I hung up and waited for the dispatcher to arrive, I saw 30 missed calls from my parents, so I decided to turn my phone off all the way up until the officer got here, as they just kept calling me. The police officer arrived and detained my sister. They took down my statement and I showed them my evidence, and they said because she stole over $1,500 that this is considered a felony and they will be charging her. I then called my parents afterwards and I explained the situation, and once I did, they started shouting at me down the phone, telling me that I shouldn't have called the police as they would have just paid it back within an hour, and that I've ruined her life. So honestly, I really need to know, am I the jerk for calling the police on my sister after she blatantly stole money from me? What should I do? No, you are definitely not the jerk, and I cannot believe that your parents are acting that way. Let's get a few things straight. You did not ruin your sister's life. She quite literally ruined hers. She's the one that stole money out of your wallet and not the other way around. Like, how can anyone possibly defend this? There is no good excuse for that, and I am sincerely appalled that your parents are like, wait, don't do this, you're gonna ruin her life. And it's like, wait a second, you're not even mad that she stole money from me, but instead you're just going to enable this behavior? Like, seriously, what's going on here? This is not okay. Because I don't care who you are, you can't just take that kind of money from someone and not expect some kind of consequence. So the fact that your parents would try to flip this on you and be like, oh, this is your fault that she's gonna be in trouble, and basically imply that you're ruining her life is so unbelievably disrespectful, it's not even funny. And this also makes me believe that maybe this is the only reason your sister came to your apartment. Like this was probably her plan the entire time. She didn't want to visit you, she just wanted a free moment away from you so that she could rob you blind. And the way your parents reacted makes them complicit in all of this. Because I think it's the principle of the matter that really counts in this situation. This is not about you getting your money back as soon as possible. This is about your sister robbing you and your parents somehow being okay with it. So no, you're definitely not the jerk. Your parents are insane for trying to defend her, and in my opinion, I think your sister's getting exactly what she deserves. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.